In this video, we are going to study the anatomy of a component. We are going to see that by default a component is composed of 4 parts, which are a CSS file, an HTML file, which is the template, an spec, and a TS file, which corresponds to the class of the component. Here, as you can see, we have the app component, and here we have the CSS file, the HTML file, the spec file, and the TS file. Let's start with the most simple one, which is a HTML file. In the HTML file, we are going to put all of the visual parts of our component. Here we have this hello world, but we could have whatever we want. This is an HTML file, so any code that is valid HTML can go here, like a button, a calendar, or something like that. We also have the class of the component, which is here in this TS file. In the class of the component, we can put data and logic. We can put variables, and we can also have functions. Here we have, in this component decorator, we have the selector. We learned that the selector is like the ID of the component, and through this ID we can make an instantiation of our component. We also have this template URL, which points to the template file of this component, which in our case is this appcomponent.html. We also have the possibility of passing several styling files. Here we have this array, which contains only one element, which is this appcomponent.css. Of course, the CSS file of our component allows us to write CSS styling rules that will only apply to the current component, in this case the app component. So for example, let's put a paragraph here. Let's wrap this in a paragraph. Now I can say, for example, paragraph color red, and now I can open a new terminal and I will say ngserf-o, and now I will go to Google Chrome, and as you can see we have hello world in red. Now let's go back to Visual Studio and let's open the final file that we haven't looked at, which is the spec file. In this spec file, we can put automatic tests so that we can do testing to our component. As you can see, we have our app component here, which is the title of this test suite. And here we can declare our app component, which is the component that we're going to use. And here we have 3 tests. Every test starts with it something, and then the body of the function. For example, in this case we have it should create an app, and as we can see we are instantiating the app component and we're verifying that something was created. This is a really simple test, but the idea is that it allows us to at least verify that a component is being successfully created. We have this other test, should have as title Angular Movies. Now in our case we don't have a title property in the class, so let's fix that right away. Let's go back to the class and I will put a title here. Any value is just fine. And now let's go to this to equal and say any value, because we are testing that the value of the title property is any value. Now this test should pass. Now let's go to the final test, should render title, and what this is doing is that it is loading the application in memory, and then we are using query selectors so we can query the final DOM and we can do something with it. For example, what we're going to do is that we're going to look for a paragraph, because it is a paragraph what we have here. And now we're going to say that the paragraph contains hello world, though let me check. Let me copy this and paste it here because it has to be an exact match. And now let's change this to paragraph so that it reflects what the test is doing. Now let's test this. Let's open a terminal and let's say ngtest, which is the command that we need to do in order to run all of our tests. And now this is going to open this Google Chrome page. And here, as you can see, we have 3 specs, which are the 3 tests that we just saw, and we have 0 failures. So as you can see, all of our tests are valid. Now let me close this, let me go back here, and I will press Ctrl C in order to stop the execution of the ngTest. Now, something that I want you to see is that here in the class of the component we can put, again, properties, which is data, but we also can put logic. For example, we can create a method like handleClick, and let's pretend that this method will execute if the user clicks on a button, and here I can do whatever I want, and here in the template we will have a button which we will be able to click, and then we would bind it to this handleClick function that we have here. This is something that we're going to learn how to do later in this section, but I just wanted to make sure that you know that in the class of the component we can put data and logic. Now let me delete this function because we don't need it. And now let's see something. What if I want to put this title variable here in the template? How can we do that? For that we have to use interpolation. We will see that next.